Hiya! Welcome to Sniper's Rest. Sniper's Rest is the last best rest stop in the here and there, the place between where you're coming from and where you're going. I am Sniper Shadow and I reside here in Sniper's Rest as a guide and a custodian to those who pass through here. I visit the worlds within the multiverse often, but I am always here to guide and care for the travelers such as yourself that pass through the here and there. Welcome, my friend! Do you ever have unrealistic expectations for yourself? You must keep to the schedule, everything has to be min-maxed, fully productive or it was a waste. This is a lie, traveler. It's okay to relax and recharge. A good friend of the rest stop once told me, the schedule is more like guidelines than actual rules. I don't think I've ever heard anything more accurate. That wizard is wise beyond his years. So relax, traveler, and as always, please take a rest here before continuing your journey. Today we continue reading the series of short stories by H.P Lovecraft. This tale is a spooky one called The Transition of Juan Romero. It was written in 1919 and first published in the 1994 Arkham House volume, Marginalia. Interestingly, this was a somewhat private writing exercise meant only for his small circle of correspondence. It does not appear on most of his lists of stories, and was only grudgingly handed over to be published by one of his good friends towards the end of his life. Let's check out this rare gem. Of the events which took place at the Norton Mine on October 18th and 19th, 1894, I have no desire to speak. A sense of duty to science is all that impels me to recall, in these last years of my life, scenes and happenings fraught with a terror doubly acute because I cannot wholly define it. But I believe that before I die, I should tell what I know of the, shall I say, transition of Juan Romero. My name and origin should not be related to posterity. In fact, I fancy it is better that they should not be, for when a man suddenly migrates to the States or the colonies, he leaves his past behind him. Besides, what I once was is not in the least relevant to my narrative, save perhaps the fact that during my service in India I was more at home amongst white-bearded native teachers than amongst my brother officers. I had delved not a little into odd Eastern lore when overtaken by the calamities which brought about my new life in America's vast West, a life wherein I found it well to accept a name, my present one, which is very common and carries no meaning. In the summer and autumn of 1894, I dwelt in the dreary expanses of the Cactus Mountains, employed as a common laborer at the celebrated Norton Mine, whose discovery by an aged prospector some years before had turned the surrounding region from a nearly unpeopled waste to a seething cauldron of sordid life. A caravan of gold lying deep below the mountain lake had enriched its venerable finder beyond his wildest dreams, and now formed the seat of extensive tunneling operations on the part of the corporation to which it had finally been sold. Additional grottos had been found, and the yield of yellow metal was exceedingly great, so that a mighty and heterogeneous army of miners toiled day and night in the numerous passages and hollow rocks. The superintendent, a Mr. Arthur, often discussed the singularity of the local geological formations, speculating on the probable extent of the chain of caves and estimating the future of the titanic mining enterprise. He considered the Auriferous cavities the result of the action of water and believed the last of them would soon be opened. It was not long after my arrival and employment that Juan Romero came to the Norton Mine. One of a large herd of folks attracted thither from the neighboring country. At first he commanded attention only because of his features, which were remarkable, despite his background. He had been found as a child in a crude mountain hut, the only survivor of an epidemic which had stalked lethally by. Near the hut, close to a rather unusual rock fissure, had lain two skeletons, newly picked by vultures and presumably forming the sole remains of his parents. No one recalled their identity, and they were soon forgotten by the many. Indeed, the crumbling of the abode hut and the closing of the rock fissure by a subsequent avalanche had helped to effacate even the scene from recollection. The attachment which Romero manifested towards me was undoubtedly commenced through the quaint and ancient Hindu ring which I wore when not engaged in active labour. Of its nature and manner of coming into my possession I cannot speak. It was my last link with a chapter of life forever closed, and I valued it highly. Soon I observed that the man was likewise interested, eyeing it with an expression that banished all suspicion of mere covetousness. Its hieroglyphics seemed to stir some faint recollection in his untutored but active mind, though he could not possibly have beheld their like before. Within a few weeks of his advent, Romero was like a faithful friend to me. Our conversation was necessarily limited. He knew but a few words of English, while I found my traditional Spanish was something quite different from the dialect of New Spain. The event which I am about to relate was unheralded by long premonitions. Though the man Romero had interested me, and though my ring had affected him peculiarly, I think that neither of us had any expectation of what was to follow when the great blast was set off. Geological considerations had dictated an extension of the mine directly downwards from the deepest part of the subterranean area, and the belief of the superintendent that only solid rock would be encountered had led to the placing of a prodigious charge of dynamite. With this work Romero and I were not connected, wherefore our first knowledge of extraordinary conditions came from others. The charge, heavier perhaps than had been estimated, had seemed to shake the entire mountain. Windows in the shanties on the slope outside were shattered by the shock, whilst miners throughout the near passages were knocked from their feet. Joule Lake, which lay above the scene of action, heaved in a tempest. Upon investigation, it was seen that a new abyss yawned indefinitely below the seat of the blast, an abyss so monstrous that no handy line might fathom it, nor any lamp illuminate it. Baffled, the excavators sought a conference with the superintendent, who ordered great lengths of rope to be taken to the pit and spliced and lowered without cessation until the bottom might be discovered. Afterwards, the pale-faced workmen appraised the superintendent of their failure. Firmly, though respectfully, they signified their refusal to revisit the chasm, or indeed to work further in the mine until it might be sealed. Something beyond their experience was evidently confronting them, or for so far as they could ascertain, the void below was infinite. The superintendent did not reproach them. Instead, he pondered deeply and made many plans for the following day. The night shift did not go on that evening. At 2 in the morning, a lone coyote on the mountain began to howl dismally. From somewhere within the works, a dog barked in answer, either to the coyote or to something else. A storm was gathering around the peaks of the range, and weirdly shaped clouds scubbed horribly across the blurred patch of celestial light which marked a gibbous moon's attempt to shine through the many layers of cirrostratus vapors. It was Romero's voice coming from the bunk above that awakened me, a voice excited and tense with some vague expectation I could not understand.
Madre de Dios! El sonido! Esa sonido! Oiga, bebe! Lo viveve, Señor! That sound!
I listened, wondering what sound he meant. The coyote, the dog, the storm, all were audible. The last named now gaining ascendancy as the wind shrieked more and more frantically. Flashes of lightning were visible through the bunkhouse window. I questioned the man, repeating the sounds I had heard.
El coyote?
El perro?
El viento?
But Romero did not reply. Then he commenced whispering, as in awe.
El ritmo, señor, el ritmo de la terra. That throb, down in the ground.
Now I also heard. I heard and shivered, without knowing why. Deep, deep below me was a sound, a rhythm, just as Juan had said, which, though exceedingly faint, yet dominated even the dog, the coyote, and the increasing tempest. To seek to describe it were useless, for it was such that no description is possible. Perhaps it was like the pulsing of the engines far down in a great liner, as sensed from the deck. Yet it was not so mechanical, not so devoid of the element of life and consciousness. Of all its qualities, remoteness in the earth most impressed me. My mind rushed to the fragments of a passage in Joseph Galantsville which Poe had quoted with tremendous effect. The vastness, profundity, and unsearchableness of his works, which have a depth in them greater than the well of Demetricus. Suddenly Romero leapt from his bunk, pausing before me to gaze at the strange ring on my hand, which glistened queerly in every flashing of lightning, and then, staring intently in the direction of the mine shaft, I also rose and stood both motionless for a time, straining our ears as the uncanny rhythm seemed more and more to take on a vital quality. Then, without apparent volition, we began to move towards the door, whose rattling in the gale held a comforting suggestion of earthly reality. The chanting in the depths, for such the sound now seemed to be, grew in volume and distinctness, and we felt irresistibly urged out into the storm, and thence to the gaping blackness of the shaft. We encountered no living creature, for the men of the night shift had been released from duty, and were doubtless at the dry gulch settlement, pouring sinister rumors into the ears of some drowsy bartender. From the watchman's cabin, however, gleamed a small square of yellow light, like the guardian eye. I dimly wondered how the rhythmic sound had affected the watchman, but Romero was moving more swiftly now, and I followed without pausing. As we descended the shaft, the sound beneath grew definitely composite. It struck me as horrible, like a sort of oriental ceremony, with the beating of drums and the chanting of many voices. I have, as you are aware, been much in India. Romero and I moved without material hesitancy through the drifts and down the ladders, ever towards the thing that allured us, yet ever with a pitifully helpless fear and reluctance. At one time I fancied I had gone mad. This was when, on wondering how our way was lighted in the absence of a lamp or candle, I realized that the ancient ring on my finger was glowing with an eerie radiance, diffusing a pallid luster through the damp and heavy air around. It was without warning that Romero, after clambering down one of the many rude ladders, broke into a run and left me alone. Some new wild note in the drumming and chanting, perceptible but slightly to me, had acted on him in a startling fashion. With a wild outcry he forged ahead, unguided by the cavern's gloom. I heard his repeat shrieks before me as he stumbled awkwardly along the level places and scrambled madly down the rickety ladders. As frightened as I was, I yet retained enough perception to note his speech, when articulate, was not of any sort known to me. Harsh but impressive polysyllables had replaced his customary mixture of bad Spanish and worse English, and of these the oft-repeated cry,
Huitzila pot chili,
seemed in the least familiar. Later, I definitely placed that word in the works of a great historian, and shuddered when the association came to me. The climax of that awful night was composite but fairly brief, beginning just as I reached the final cavern of the journey. Out of the darkness immediately ahead burst a final shriek from Juan, which was joined by such a chorus of uncouth sound as I could never hear again and survive. In that moment, it seemed as if all the hidden terrors and monstrosities of Earth had become articulate in an effort to overwhelm the human race. Simultaneously, the light from my ring was extinguished, and I saw a new light glimmering from lower space but a few yards ahead of me. I had arrived at the abyss, which was now redly aglow, and which evidently swallowed up the unfortunate Romero. Advancing, I peered over the edge of the chasm which no line could fathom, and which was now a pandemonium of flickering flame and hideous uproar. At first I beheld nothing but a seething blur of luminosity, but then shapes, all infinitely distant, began to detach themselves from the confusion, and I saw, was it Juan Romero? But God, I dare not tell you what I saw. Some power from heaven coming to my aid obliterated both sights and sounds in such a crash as may be heard when two universes collide in space. Chaos supervened, and I knew the peace of oblivion. I hardly know how to continue, since conditions so singular are involved, but I will do my best, not even trying to differentiate betwixt the real and the apparent. When I awakened, I was safe in my bunk, and the red glow of dawn was visible at the window. Some distance away, the lifeless body of Juan Romero lay upon a table, surrounded by a group of men, including the camp doctor. The men were discussing the strange death of the Mexican as he lay asleep, a death seemingly connected in some way to the terrible bolt of lightning that has struck and shaken the mountain. No direct cause was evident, and an autopsy failed to shew any reason why Romero should not be living. Snatches of convocation indicated beyond a doubt that neither Romero nor I had left the bunkhouse during the night, that neither had been awake during the frightful storm which passed over the Cactus Range. That storm, said men who had ventured down the mine shaft, had caused extensive cave-ins, and had completely closed the deep abyss which had created so much apprehension the day before. When I asked the watchman what sounds he had heard prior to the mighty thunderbolt, he mentioned a coyote, a dog, and the snarling mountain wind. Nothing more, nor do I doubt his word. Upon the resumption of work, Superintendent Arthur called on some especially dependable men to make a few investigations around the spot where the gulf had appeared. Though hardly eager, they obeyed, and a deep boring was made. The results were very curious. The roof of the void, as seen whilst it was open, was not by any means thick, yet now the drills of the investigators met what appeared to be a limitless extent of solid rock. Finding nothing else, not even gold, the superintendent abandoned his attempts, but a perplexed look occasionally steals over his countenance when he sits thinking at his desk. The other thing is curious. Shortly after waking on that morning after the storm, I noticed the unaccountable absence of my Hindu ring from my finger. I had prized it greatly, yet nevertheless felt a sensation of relief at its disappearance. If one of my fellow miners appropriated it, he must have been quite clever in disposing of his booty, for despite advertisements and a police search, the ring was never seen again. Somehow I doubt it was stolen by mortal hands, for many strange things were taught me in India. My opinion of my whole experience varies from time to time. In broad daylight, at most seasons, I am apt to think the greater part of it a mere dream. But sometimes, in the autumn, about 2 a.m, when winds and animals howl dismally, there comes from inconceivable depths below a damnable suggestion of rhythmical throbbing.
and I feel that the transition of Juan Romero was a terrible one indeed.
That concludes our tale for this week, my friend. Please return next week and we will continue with another short story by H.P Lovecraft. If you wish to rest some more, please find a space that suits you, whether you curl up by the fire, partake in some food and beverages in our kitchen, take a nap in one of our many rooms, or take a stroll around the garden. Please know you are always welcome at Sniper's Rest, my friend. If you are continuing your journey, the multiverse holds mysteries and wonders this week. To the north, Earth's surface has become a barren wasteland. Our only hope is beneath the waves. Build a life for your city on the ocean floor. Can you survive the depths? To the west, so you've been sent to explore the frontiers of outer space. These brave folks risk their lives on a dangerous planet to uncover rarities and mysteries of the universe. To the east, well, you found yourself in hell, huh? You and your buddies are all linked up by that chain there too, Well, you've got two options. Cry about it, or find a way out of here. Good luck. And if you're making your own way out there, good luck, my friend, wherever you end up. Wherever you come from and wherever you're going, thank you for spending some time here with us at Sniper's Rest. Remember to take care of yourself, be kind to others, hydrate, take a moment to look out into the world and marvel at how incredible it all is. How incredible you are, friend. Until next time, please take care on your way.